So let's go to our next topic, Carol. So the next question is basically, the Office of the National Coordinator has established their Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement, or TEFCA, which is designed to establish a universal floor for interoperability in the exchange of electronic health information. What are some of the privacy and security challenges inherent with that initiative? Tim, let me start off with you on this one, on what some of your thoughts are on this whole issue, because I know you're dealing with some of this as well.
So I think there are a number of issues here. Weirdly, I think there are possibly more issues around privacy than security, and so in my simple mind, security is sort of how you protect things, and privacy is what you kind of protect. TEFCA's kind of followed what I would call some of the best practices around security. And to the degree we know things, they pushed a lot of expectations off to what they call QHINs, Qualified Health Information Networks, that are, there's these unicorn organizations that are going to do a lot of great things. But basically, the thing that I think is more of a challenge is the appropriate use of the information. Lee, I think that it's going to be very hard to do enforcement, even on security. It's going to be hard to do enforcement. And I think under privacy, where somebody's protected the information, but they've got the information and begun to use it improperly, it's going to be hard to figure out, and it's going to be hard to sort of take action against. It's going to be on or off. You're bad, go away. Or I don't see how the enforcement is going to work yet without some precedent. It's unfortunately probably going to be a little bit messy, with a few instances having to surface, and people have laid out a plan, but executing on that plan is yet to be seen, because we're all still new. So I think you're going to have a lot of folks having access to the information. They'll be following the rules. But then as the networks get bigger on a national scale, not just bad actors, but folks who make mistakes are likely to occur. And I think as that happens, which is just normal, it's going to cause some trust concerns. It's going to cause, just some challenges to what I think is a good mousetrap going out the gate, but we don't know what scale looks like yet.
I think it's interesting as I look at this and go back to kind of the privacy and security challenges that TEFCA and moving forward with interoperability on a scale basis really comes down to, when you look at interoperability and what this is all about, it is really trying to increase the availability. When you look at 21st century cures, it's really about providing greater access of data, electronic health record data and other data for patients, right? For patients to have more control over their information. When you look at, therefore, the environment that TEFCA is going to set up. TEFCA sets up the capability with, Tim, you were talking about the QHINs, the Qualified Health Information Networks. And then there's a set of participants that will provide information into these QHINs. And then you have a whole set of sub-participants, even under that will also be providing additional information into the participants to the QHINs. What it's providing, therefore, is a significant number of additional, what I would call, risk vectors on all these various data exchange points. Right? Because now you've got a lot of data that's going around, and you get a lot of different stakeholders, actors that are participating in this. Add to that the cyber attackers who are also looking at this and saying, man, there's a lot of opportunities here for the ability to hack into these various, what I would call, risk vectors that may not be as protected as others. So, that's the risk that's here. That's part of interoperability. I think as far as an industry is concerned, I think everybody is of the opinion that the value here of providing greater information and greater opportunities for patients to control their information is fantastic. And that's exactly what we want to be able to do. So the question comes back to, okay, with all this additional data that's going to be exchanged, PHI and other types of identifiable health information data that's going to be exchanged, how do we control that? How do we manage it? So I think that what's happened with the recognized coordinating entity, Sequoia, who's named by ONC to manage the onboarding of the QHINs, what they have developed is a number of standard operating procedures, or SOPs, as part of the common agreement. The common agreement basically kind of sets out a single legal entity, legal document and agreement that all these QHINs are going to sign. So we're not going to have individual agreements. That's good. The QHIN, the common agreement also sets out some parameters or guardrails around security and privacy as well. HIPAA becomes a very important part of that. Okay, the privacy rule, the security rule for covered entities. But also what they're trying to do is for all of the potential QHINs that'll be onboarded. And again, we're not speaking on behalf of ONC or Sequoia, the RCE. I will give that disqualifier right now, okay? Yeah. But from our vantage point, what they are doing and what they have done is they've created a draft standard operating procedure around security. And as Mike was talking about earlier, we've worked on creating a program. We're calling it our Trusted Network Accreditation Program. Mike, from the HITRUST perspective, we've partnered with HITRUST on this to provide as well the security and privacy framework and kind of trust framework to go through for QHINs in an effort to, again, create kind of I would say a platform, a floor for organizations to go through in an effort to, for any of the potential QHINs that would want to go through the process in an effort to minimize the risk. However, that it's going to be good. Tim, I think your point is well taken. I do think that we may have to go through a few issues. I hope not, but I sincerely hope not, but it may take some of that for us to help determine the right level of oversight and guardrails that we want to put in place. But we're at least doing that to try to, again, you got the HIPAA component, we've got the standard operating procedure, and HITRUST R2 is listed under the list there. There could be others, other frameworks as well that might be considered, but it helps to at least start to hopefully minimize some of the risk exposure. That's Mike. What are your thoughts?
I was going to say real quick, based on what I've read of that material, I don't think they could have done a better job. I mean, I mean, it's certainly state of the art for where we're at. I mean, it's got the best of what we do in this country. It's just, we don't know what it all is going to look like when it's all put together. And there are some clever cyber people out there. So, I think we just got to set expectations that we really don't know what we don't know, but the effort that's gone into this has been Herculean, and it's the best stuff we've got.
No, you're right. Mike?
Yeah, I agree. So as Lee knows, as he's kind of been my coach over the last couple of years, and as it relates to interoperability in general, I'm very passionate about this initiative that we've undertaken. And when I say we, I mean as a community, right? I think, Tim, to your point, the RCE has done an amazing job, right? In terms of what they've really outlined there. They really thought of everything. But as Lee mentioned, we don't know what we don't know. So I think that they've structured the requirements in such a way to cover the we don't know what we don't know, right? So we need to make sure we've got an appropriate program in place and we've got appropriate assurances as it relates to security and privacy to cover the unknown that could potentially come up associated with this data. Make no mistake, I think this is probably one of the most important, if not the most important initiatives that we've undertaken from a country perspective to improve care delivery, right? So I think it's fantastic. But there's a reason why, and again, to Lee's comments, I'm not speaking on behalf of the RCE or Sequoia, but or ONC, but I think there's a reason why they've indicated that there's a certain bar that organizations need to meet relative to security and privacy, right? They need to make sure they have the appropriate level of transparency into what's going on, or more importantly, what's not going on within those organizations. I mean, this is going to be everyone's personal healthcare information that's going to be available. What I think is interesting, and Lee, I'm going to turn it back to you here in a minute, but I believe organizations that will be considered participants and sub-participants don't even know what that means, right? They don't know how big that ecosystem is, and they don't know what the impact is on them. I mean, we're effectively talking about every and any organization that is connecting to, Tim, as you mentioned, the QHINs, right, to feed information, could be considered a participant or a sub-participant. So I think the cool thing about this is it's the first time that I think we have an effective hammer, if you will, to enforce protecting personal information holistically across the country, and to arguably any type of organization that would be considered a participant or a sub-participant. I don't know how the QHINs are going to monitor that and enforce that. And I don't know if they recognize what the ONC and what the RCE has said within the common agreement is that onus is on the QHINs, right? To make sure that all the participants and sub-participants follow the same requirements that are in the common agreement. How are they going to do that? I mean, it is a flavor of vendor risk management, I guess, but we're really talking about business partners, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months. But as an industry and as really an ecosystem, I don't think everyone understands what that means and what the impact is going to be. And they need to get started now. As Lee and I always say, like, don't wait, right? You need to get started now to make sure you're fulfilling these requirements. Lee, any thoughts on that?
So, Mike, you raised some good points, and what I'm going to go back to for a second is the kind of the key 6 principles of trusted exchange that the trusted exchange framework is really about. Because I really believe, as both of you were indicating, I really believe that the RCE, ONC has really done a fantastic job here in at least in listening and providing the transparency and the opportunities. And there, really, this goes back to these principles. 1, standardization, transparency, cooperation and non-discrimination, privacy, security, and patient safety, access to electronic health information, and population level data. So you look at all that, and I think that those, they have absolutely, I would say, done everything they possibly can to go back to those principles and have those as guiding principles throughout this. And Tim, going back to your point, I think it's the best, I agree, it can be right now, but I think that this is going to be, quote, a work in progress, and we're going to continue to make refinements to this as this continues to roll out. And as QHINs get onboarded, hopefully, as we're looking at timing, I'm hearing timing, we start to onboard potential QHINs by the end of this year. So we start that whole process. And I think this is going to continue, the momentum will continue to build as we're looking to scale and get more in the way of organizations from an interoperability perspective.
Yeah, there's somebody. There's a
go
comment that said, "I don't think this is the best. The TEFCA is not the best." And I'm going to say, well, let me back up. I'm talking about the security standard operating procedure.
Yes.
I'm not necessarily giving that full endorsement to the entire, scope of TEFCA, but I from what I've seen of the security pieces in particular, I don't know what else could be brought to bear, frankly. So perhaps somebody else does, but just within the context of this webinar and security, I think they've done a very rigorous and state-of-the-art job. No, they've had help, HITRUST and EHNAC and others, but I do think that there's some good stuff brought forward here, and I believe that. Great,
thanks. All right, let's go to the next topic, Carol, which is basically, this is again staying with the theme on Sequoia here as the recognized coordinating entity and their development and maintaining of the common agreement. I think this is going to be kind of a little more, perhaps a little more than what we talked about is, or talking about kind of what are the certification reports, security assessments that participants will be required to submit to the ONC and RCE, and what are the similarities and differences of these different options. I'll start here by saying that, and then turn it over to Tim and Mike. But the intent of the common agreement, as we were talking about the security standard operating procedure, they have, in fact, this up to this point, gone out with the draft standard operating procedure. It is subject to some additional changes, revisions that they may consider between now and I think the July timeframe. But yeah, I think that initially they have indicated the HITRUST R2 for the security aspect here for the potential QHINs as an entity that the entities can go through. I do think as well that's important for all of our participants here to understand is that the common agreement requires the QHINs to go through an annual review as well, and to again to make sure that they're going through and that they're meeting HIPAA requirements, that they're meeting whatever the HITRUST framework it has around security and privacy as well, which includes the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, requirements as well around its cybersecurity framework, etc. So it's incorporated that. The HITRUST framework also includes the General Data Protection Regulation aspects of that, GDPR, and a variety of other best practices and what I would call our standards as well. So the intent is to clearly raise the bar, and then we've incorporated our Trusted Network Accreditation program that we've developed as well, which aligns with that of the common agreement. Again, that is not a required or incorporated in the standard operating procedure at this point. The HITRUST R2 is, and so that uses a third-party assessor organization to go through, and there's a number of reports that are part of that process, including the QA process that HITRUST goes through. So the intent is to kind of raise the bar, and I think as Tim was indicating, as he looks at this from the lens of a potential QHIN, that I think this particular framework, our trust framework, and what we're trying to do here again, for those organizations that are going to be potential QHINs, is really about raising the bar. So those are kind of my opening thoughts on this. Mike, let me turn it over to you for kind of and then get Tim's thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think, again, going back to what Tim said before, they got it right when we look at the standard operating procedures as it relates to security and privacy. I mean, the stipulations within there, Lee, as you mentioned, is a minimum of an annual review, right? Matter of fact, it specifically indicates it must be a certification, which means it's got to come from some independent certifying organization. And I think the reason why they did that, I'm speculating, but I think the reason why they did that is they realized that not all assurances are created equal. And organizations that have been providing self-attestations for years, or even, you know, a level of a validated assessment like a SOC report isn't going to give them the right level of transparency into whether they are addressing not only security and privacy compliance requirements, but back to Tim's point, the cyber risks as well, right? And making sure that they're addressing it from a program maturity perspective. So I think they got it right. And you know, what's going to be interesting is as organizations go through that process, as you mentioned, you know, right now, HITRUST is the only certification that's currently listed. And we also know rightly that is part of the TNAP program. So organizations that get HITRUST certified, not only from a security and privacy perspective, but that helps with the overall TNAP accreditation as well, that helps with some of the operational aspects from a common agreement standpoint. Maybe we'll see more. I don't know. But I think it's the first time that we're seeing a regulator indicate that having appropriate levels of transparent assurances is important and it's necessary. And they don't have the time to go do their own independent review across all of these organizations. I mean, if you want to invest within the community, you know, make sure that you are investing within your security and privacy programs. You got to take this stuff seriously, right? You got to make investments in order to provide the appropriate level of assurance. So I think they got it right is the short version, going back to what Tim's comments were as it relates to the requirements that they're looking for. Tim, and any other perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you've got to understand where most of the interoperability space is, and it's coming out of our eHealth exchange and care quality kind of space. It's around IHE protocols, you know, I mean, and so, you know, there's some comments in the chat about, I'll call them some more modern ways to do stuff. Yeah, they left a lot of stuff off the table that they're working toward, like the whole fire space is still coming, okay, to be sort of sorted. But for the space that we're at in healthcare and our legacy infrastructure, like, you know, there's 3 or 4 big EHR vendors that dominate the industry, you know, given where we're at, they really did put those guardrails in the way that I think our current health systems can participate and have sufficient trust that we're going about it in a way that will make progress and let the ball move forward. No one's saying it's perfect, no, but I do think they've taken a really good swing at a starting point, which is basically where we're at.
And I think the bottom line here is trying to assure stakeholder trust. Now, and that's going to be, I think, key across all of the various stakeholders that are going to be part of the implementation here. So great conversation. Let's go to the next topic, Carol and Tim. This one's kind of for you. Talks about the, you know, Michigan's Health Information Network, or MiHIN, that your executive director of has a strong focus on ensuring security and privacy within its healthcare ecosystem, and you support a lot of stakeholders.
We do.
Can you talk about the strategies implemented and assessments achieved by your organization to meet TEFCA's stringent requirements as you're kind of moving forward?
Yeah, so we've gone. I mean, I think we've gone through all the programs you all offer. You know, and sort of TNAF, HITRUST, EHNAC, Direct Trust. You know, there's a lot of accreditation pieces. And to be blunt, a lot of those reasons we do a lot of those accreditations are so when other participants, those sub-participants, right, or participants, depending on how we look at them, come to us and say, hey, it's that time of year, we got to do our own audits. You know, we were originally getting clobbered by the number of giant systems coming to us and essentially doing their own weird mini audits of our organization. Okay, to be able to take standard templates from EHNAC and HITRUST and even our TNAP ones and say, look, here you go, read this, this is what we did, and have them be able to cross-translate that into their own needs was, you know, it just lifted this burden off of our cybersecurity teams. We're spending hours and hours being audited. Okay, so I mean, at the get-go, that was a lot of our justification is our own stakeholders asking us to prove that we were protecting the data that they were entrusting us with. Okay, I mean, that hasn't changed. So that is still there. As we go and really look at this QHIN space, where we're trying to step into basically being a broker on an even grander scale, we kind of want to know what yardstick we're going to be measured by for performance. Okay, it's the same kind of question. And so by doing, you know, sort of the TNAP kind of certification, it's sort of like, well, where are we on where that yardstick is, and how do we assure all our flow down participants and sub participants that we're meeting that bar, and then how do we kind of go the other direction and turn around to everybody and say, okay, so these other QHINs have gone to the same level of rigor that we have, so it's okay for us to sort of work with them. Okay, I mean, so there's this up and down space of the trust that's important for, but it's also really critical to standardize for our own cybersecurity teams, because, you know, a big chunk of the day they're off fighting things, not just doing audits and preparing for accreditations and certification. Okay, and so getting through those, getting patterns for how and what we need to do, and then operationalizing those across the board. The more that becomes standard, the more that becomes sort of well-defined, the better off we are for being able to sort of establish repeatable processes, especially as we get turnover. You know, we have I think we have a team of about 8 people now, not counting the sort of peripheral folks, which is a pretty good sized team for us. And you know, it's a huge amount of work to sort of protect everything. I mean, and it never ends.
It's not only a huge amount of work, it's a huge amount of cost. And
the key to our viability, you know, we work like day and night.
But what I look at, Tim, when I hear you, I think the other thing is that you were talking about is the amount of work that takes. But the one thing I heard you say, that at least by going through the EHNAC HITRUST frameworks, that has at least been able to, from a value proposition, and when you're looking at time, et cetera, for your cyber team and for your staff, hopefully minimized the number of, quote, surveys that you used to have to be responding to. You now have the data points to be able to go back to those organizations to say, hey, here's we don't need to respond to your survey. Here's our data. We can give this to you. You can see how this crosswalks to your requirements.
Yeah.
And therefore, we don't need to do all of these many surveys that you're being asked to do.
It's the value of standardization. It's basically interoperable security, if you will, where we could say, here's how we do things. And people go, okay, I understand your yardstick and I see how you measured up. Good enough. Okay. Yep. And that is a force multiplier for our folks having time. But it's also important that if I get somebody from another organization and they've been through one of these programs before, they can learn and understand our way of doing business. Okay. Yep. So it's not just the ability to say, hey, trust us, we're doing a good job. It's also the portability of new team members coming in and learning a repeatable pattern of what to expect and understanding what best practice is. And so, as we bring an army of interns along every year and grow them up and people hire them away, but that process is really creating individuals who have a consistent understanding of this space. And this is a big deal.
Yep. Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah. So to go to some of Tim's earlier comments, it just makes me angry to think about. For years, we've been trying to reduce the cost of care delivery, and yet all these organizations are still doing their independent proprietary audits using questionnaires. They're all outdated. It's not getting them the appropriate information to actually make better informed business decisions. We're fooling ourselves, right? I think that the entire process is broken. And those organizations don't know what they don't know. It's Groundhog Day. Every day they go in, the procurement officer is looking, execute security questionnaire A, make sure somebody fills it out. That whole process, as Tim mentioned, is not only unnecessary, right, in my opinion, but it's a waste of time and resources, and it takes us away from delivering care to patients. That's what we should be doing in this industry. Why are we wasting so much time and money and resources in executing that process? So I couldn't agree more that I think those independent certifications and accreditations needs to be the answer. Not only because is it going to provide the appropriate information and transparent information, but at the same time, it's going to save us money, it's going to save us resources, and all of that can be redirected into better care delivery. So I think that's very, very important as part of this equation. And I think, to Tim's point, as organizations obtain those, they're not only using those to satisfy some requests that may be coming from stakeholders, but they're becoming a differentiator. I mean, for organizations to say, we've met this bar relative to our security and privacy program, there are some stakeholders that say, I want to work with somebody that's met that bar, as opposed to not meeting that bar. If you think back to our marketing classes, right, years and years ago in college, it was really two different types of organizations. You either had a cost leader or you had a differentiator relative to the service, right? Now I think there is a third category, which is you've got a cost leader, you got a differentiator relative to the service, but then you also have a differentiator relative to the maturity of security and privacy. It's relevant to every type of organization. So what we are seeing is that some stakeholders are making decisions relative to what business partner that they're going to work with, not because they've got the cheapest cost and not because they've got the best differentiator relative to the service, but because they've made the most investments in their security and privacy posture. And I think we'll continue to see that. Not only as a differentiator, but as hopefully as a requirement, especially within our industry, because the risk that we're dealing with, the loss of human life, doesn't get more important than that.
And on that note, we're going to go to the Q&A, and I've already seen a few items here, and then I'm going to Carol, I'm going to respond to one. And I think it's for both probably Mike from HITRUST as well as EHNAC. And I think the question was in relation to reports, et cetera. Hey, can we use the reports that come out of HITRUST, EHNAC as well to address most organizations' requirements as far as third-party risk management, et cetera? And I believe both Mike and I would say the answer is yes. We're trying to do that so that organizations can minimize the amount of work that they have to go through. And I saw somebody saying, amen, we get requests weekly from 600 health plan customers for additional security questions. Our hope, both of us, as quote, recognized security practices, and this goes back to the Public Law 116-321, that we both have been working towards as far as our frameworks and maturing those frameworks and making and evolving them to be as compliant with not only best practices, but the latest standards that are out there. That's what we're trying to do is to, I'll say we're trying to minimize, I'd love to say eliminate, but we're trying to minimize the amount of additional work that any of your organizations have to go through to meet third-party risk management requirements from organizations. Mike, is that fair?
I think that's fair. And, one of the participants had chatted to not only the amen one, I love that one, but also, even when organizations obtain these certain types of accreditations and certifications, they're still having some challenges in getting their stakeholders to accept them in place of, say, the proprietary questionnaire. So Lee and I, and I'm sure Tim, are happy to help any of you throughout that process. What we typically find is that the individuals that you're working with in that instance, I'm not trying to be ugly, but they're ignorant, right? They may not understand what you're trying to provide them, and they may not understand that what you're providing them not only covers everything else that they're asking for, but more than that, right? From an assurance standpoint, if you're dealing with a procurement analyst that's just having to check the box, all they know is, hey, checklist says obtain security questionnaire. If I can't check that box, I don't know what to do, right? It's kind of like deer in the headlights. So we can help you in having those conversations. I think the other important thing that Lee alluded to is when you go through this process, as Tim knows, to get certain certifications and accreditations, there's ways to, for lack of a better term, massage that data to present it through the lens that somebody is asking for, right? So if somebody is asking you to say, all I know is NIST 171, I'm a DoD government CMMC contractor, and I need assurances over NIST 800-171. So you're giving me this HITRUST certification, or you're giving me this TNAP accreditation that has HITRUST certification, et cetera. How does that get me comfort over 800-171? There's many different ways to what we refer to as assess once, report many. So take that one assessment and show them that the lens that you want to see from a comfort standpoint, here it is. And we can help you in doing that. I think I certainly speak for Lee and Tim to help you in understanding how do you present that and educate the community of stakeholders that frankly don't even know what they're asking for or why they're asking for it most of the time.
And when you said massage, I just want to make sure they're not manipulating the data. They're just kind of reporting on it a slice or dice different way.
That's correct.
Right.
That would be a
that's right.
correct assessment.
You can use that word.
Good clarification, Tim.
You can take your HITRUST report and then run a slice of a report through it and produce something that maps to one of those other requirements.
And Tim, you're exactly right. But what we find is that a lot of organizations have different ways of asking the same information, and I think that's the point that Mike was addressing and that you're talking about. Yes, it's a matter of however somebody is looking to ask it, to be able to provide the information, and both of us give those types of reports, and it's just a matter of hopefully, what we're trying, what I think what both of us are trying to do is to try to give organizations, one, the trust in the information and the amount of rigor we both understand, the amount of time, level, and commitment and resource that it takes to go through any one of our accreditation or certifications. It's a significant lift.
It's a
But what
significant.
we're trying, yes, but what we're trying to do at the end of that is just what you talked about, Tim, is trying to get to the point where you're able to save by having those reports, having that information available to give to when whoever's going to ask you for a survey, you've got the information to give it to them, and it's going to minimize the amount of additional work that your staff has to go through. That's really what this is about, and raising the bar on trust, between various stakeholders. So, Carol, let me turn it over to you, and see other questions that people may have.
Yeah. So it's nice. You guys are going through the chat and have been responding to quite a bit of activity in there, and then answering questions along the way. I think since we've only got a couple of minutes left, it was interesting. Since Michael, I think you actually talked about the NIST framework, that there was a question posed, although not yet specifically called on in TEFCA SOPs. Can you share your perspectives on the NIST privacy framework, which obviously a lot of health providers use, and its potential for use by TEFCA to minimize privacy risk? Privacy, Tim, we have a privacy question.
Yeah.
So, Mike, do you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Or Tim, go ahead.
Let Mike go. I'm fine. I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. So, and I did see that question come in. So what we're seeing is, as it relates to the NIST privacy standards, we're actually seeing more and more adoption of that. And we're seeing it become incorporated within other authoritative sources as kind of like the baseline from a requirement standpoint. So I think it's great work by NIST. And we actually worked with NIST throughout that process in a collaborative fashion. I think the limitation that currently exists within the marketplace is the lack of assurances relative to privacy. And I think Tim was getting to this right earlier. How do you ensure you're using the data appropriately, and how do you ensure that you're addressing privacy? It's one thing to make sure you've got appropriate, again, policies and procedures in place. It's another thing to make sure you're treating that data appropriately. And I think NIST has done a really good job of outlining what organizations should do from a programmatic perspective to address that. I think the reason why you haven't seen, I'm speculating, right? So I'd like to get Lee's thoughts on this, but I think the reason why you haven't seen the RCE and TEFCA maybe explicitly indicate, well, if you follow the NIST privacy requirements, it's going to meet the requirements within the common agreement, is because there's no such thing as a NIST privacy certification necessarily, right, that exists today. However, I think it is a great resource, and although it may not be at the level of specification to ensure that it's implemented appropriately, it is a great resource to leverage, and it's something that we are incorporating within the HITRUST framework, right, over the upcoming months from a privacy perspective. Lee, I don't know, any other thoughts on that?
So I'll just say this, then I want to go to Tim as well. But I think the issue, when you start to look at this from the standpoint of the RCE and they're really looking at this, Tim, I think you talked about this earlier as well, from a privacy perspective, that they're trying to look at this very, globally and trying to set a floor. And I think privacy and security are very, very key in relation to what they're doing. Perhaps part of the reason, and I think it's part of the common agreement where they're really looking at both, which is why they've selected the whole HITRUST R2 as far as kind of the security piece of this, because when you look at what HITRUST does, they have both the security and the privacy aspects covered. And then you add HIPAA to that as well in relation to the privacy rule and the security rule. And then you've got NIST as well, which is incorporated into the HITRUST framework, trust framework, similar to what we've done as well on the EHNAC side. I think they were able to, from an RC perspective, have all of that, which is why they selected HITRUST to be on the list that they've so far developed of organizations that can be the certifiers for QHINs to meet the common agreement as far as that standard operating procedure is the HITRUST R2. Will there be others? Don't know. It could be, but clearly I think that was part of that whole aspect. Tim, any last comment there?
Just like we said before, with sort of HITRUST, I can kind of run a report and spit out this other kind of assessment or slice that people are looking for. I have every confidence that between sort of HITRUST and EHNAC, the NIST components will be incorporated over time and into the framework. With these frameworks, what they don't help you with is they don't give you sort of like a reference implementation that says, here's all the answers, right? It's just a framework that says this is a good way to organize everything, but they don't necessarily tell you all the guts that go in it, right? Those are your own policies, your own procedures, your own practices kind of stuff. And that's where the hard part is, okay? And so pick a framework, get it going, get it ready to go, make it work, and then you can evolve it toward whatever you want to sort of fill in these frameworks, because largely they're similar. And so, it's sort of like taking the data, mapping it to sort of a master, data model. And then as people come along and say, well, can you spit it out this way? Can you spit it out that way? That's how I view the different frameworks. And so if the world moves to needing to see it in some official NIST lens, I feel very confident with what we've done. We can kind of slice that data and push it out that way, or very close to that way, right out the gate. And so, whether we transition to NIST or HITRUST transitions to NIST, it doesn't really matter to me.
Thank you, Tim. And Tim, you had the last words on this. And let me thank both Tim as well as Mike for really a terrific session here in the webinar, and we thank all of you for all of your questions as well. Carol, let me turn it over to you.
Yes, thanks. And I'll wrap this up really quick. A copy of the recording will be sent out to all the attendees and the registrants as fast as we can get it edited. I will, of course, edit the opening slide. Thanks, Lee. I was reading my script. I appreciate that. But more than anything, I appreciate your time today, and I hope everybody stays safe and healthy. And thank you, Lee, Michael, Tim, a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.